This video will show you how to master key Schlage large format interchangeable cores. These are the topics that will be covered: removing the plug from the shell, removing master pins from the shell, loading top pins and springs, reading the bitting list, installing bottom and master pins in the plug, installing the plug into the shell. A Schlage pin kit, part number 40-119, is required for pinning cylinders. In addition to pins, the kit contains the basic set of tools needed to rekey a large format interchangeable core. If your pin kit does not contain a plug holder, you will need to purchase one separately. If your key system includes Schlage Primus cylinders, you will also need a Primus finger pin kit, part number 40-070. In addition to the Schlage pin kit and the tools contained within it, you will need a setup key. You may also find it helpful to have a small pointed tool and a pinning tray or a piece of ribbed rubber matting. You will need a copy of the Master Key System bitting list or pinning sheet. If the Master Key System was produced by the Schlage factory, the bitting and pinning information will be contained on a structure sheet. The master keys and change keys for large format cores are referred to as operating keys. The control key, which removes the core from the housing, is referred to as a control key. The control key uses a different key blank than the operating keys and has a tip cut in the 7th space position. As viewed from the front of the core, the control key turns clockwise approximately 15 degrees. From the back of the core, notice how the locking pin retracts when the key is turned and that the key only turns in one direction. The operating key, which is either an individual change key or a master key, rotates 360 degrees clockwise. It also rotates 360 degrees counterclockwise. Insert the smaller notched end of the cap removal tool into the back of the cap. Push the tool inward toward the back of the plug. Turn the tool counterclockwise approximately 4 revolutions until the cap can be removed from the back of the plug. Tap the back of the plug on the work surface until the cap pin and cap pin spring fall out of the plug. Insert an operating key, either a change key or a master key. Do not use the control key. While holding the key stationary in a vertical position, rotate the entire core counterclockwise 1/4 of a turn. Make sure the plug follower undercut is facing away from the top pins. Use the plug follower to push the plug out of the shell, making sure the plug does not rotate. It is important that the plug follower maintains contact with the back of the plug. It is also important to keep the key fully inserted in the plug to hold the check pin in place. Place the plug in the pinning block. The plug can be inserted from either side of the pinning block since the block is symmetrical. From the front of the shell, rotate the plug follower until the flat portion is facing down toward the bottom of the shell. From the front of the shell, push the plug follower inward until it is flush with the face of the shell. Rotate the plug follower until the flat portion of the follower is facing upward and is aligned under the top pins. At this point, any master pins contained in the shell will fall out. Slide the plug follower until an equal portion of the plug follower extends from the front and back of the shell. Then rotate the follower until the flat portion of the follower is facing down toward the bottom of the shell. The plug has 7 pin chamber holes. The 7th hole, closest to the back of the plug, contains the control bottom pin that is the same in all Schlage large format cores. It does not need to be removed when rekeying the core. The remaining 6 pin chambers contain bottom pins, and some of the chambers may also contain master pins. While holding your finger over the 7th pin, turn the entire pinning block and plug upside down to allow the pins to fall out of the plug. If the control bottom pin falls out, reinsert it into the plug. The pointed end of the control pin should be pointing down toward the pin chamber hole. Remove the operating key and insert the setup key. The setup key is a specially modified key that has all number 9 bittings. It is designed to hold the check pin in place when reinserting the plug into the shell. If the check pin and check pin spring fall out, first install the spring into the hole in the bottom of the plug. Then install the check pin into the plug. The hole in the check pin should be facing the spring, and the toe of the pin should be pointing toward the slot of the keyway. Push down on the check pin and then insert the setup key. Turn the plug until pin chamber holes are pointing upward. If the springs and top pins have been accidentally or intentionally removed from the shell, they will need to be reinstalled. Insert the tabbed end of the plug follower into the front of the shell. Make sure the undercut portion of the follower is facing the bottom of the shell. Slide the plug follower into the shell until the first 3 pin chambers in the shell are exposed. Insert a spring into the 3rd pin chamber hole. Make sure it is dropped down fully. Depending on variances between springs, the end of the spring may be sticking out slightly. Place the top pin over the spring and push the pin down to depress the spring slightly. The factory typically uses a number 3 top pin in every chamber. The top pin should be grasped close to either end to make it easier to seat it on top of the spring. With the pin partially inserted into the pin chamber, push the plug follower inward until it puts pressure on the top pin. This action will hold the top pin in place and allow you to remove the tweezers and reposition them so you can push the top pin down until it is flush. When the top pin is flush, the plug follower will slide forward and it will hold the pin in place. Repeat the same procedures to load the springs and top pins in the 2nd and 1st pin chambers. Working from the back of the shell, slowly slide the plug follower until the 4th, 5th, and 6th pin chambers are exposed. Make sure the tab on the plug follower is vertically aligned with the pin chamber holes. Install the springs and top pins, starting with the pin chamber toward the middle of the shell and working toward the back of the shell. Repeat this process for the 5th and 6th pin chambers. Make sure the plug follower is flush with the back of the shell. Insert the actuating pin into the actuating ring. Note the locking pin in the shell has a small hole that the actuating pin fits into. Place the actuating ring and pin assembly onto the back of the shell and slide the plug follower toward the back of the shell to hold the actuating ring in place. A pinning sheet contains information on which bottom, master, and top pins are used in each pin chamber. If the master key system was produced by the Schlage factory, the pinning information will sometimes be contained on a form called a structure sheet. If you do not have pinning information in written form, you will need to contact the Schlage factory, your service provider, or you will need to calculate the pin numbers manually. The pin numbers are read from left to right. Pin numbers are also read from bottom to top. The number in the lower left-hand corner represents the bottom pin number used in the 1st pin chamber in the plug. The 1st pin chamber is located at the front of the plug. Unlike small format interchangeable cores, large format interchangeable cores are pinned from the front of the core, moving toward the back of the core. The numbers in the middle of the chart represent the master pins. Note that some chambers may not have any master pins, and some chambers may contain more than one master pin. The numbers at the top of the chart represent the top pins. The pin kit contains 3 different length top pins that are numbered 1, 2, and 3. To make pinning simpler, the Schlage factory is currently using number 3 top pins in all chambers. We will follow that convention in this video. Place the plug into the plug holder and remove the operating key. Insert a setup key to hold the check pin in place. If the check pin and spring fell out when the plug was removed from the shell, the check pin and spring should be inserted prior to installing the bottom pins. If the control bottom pin fell out during a previous step, it should be reinserted into the 7th pin chamber. Note that the point of the pin, which is very slight, should be pointing down toward the pin chamber prior to inserting it into the plug. The pinning sheet indicates a number 9 bottom pin is used in the 1st pin chamber. Select a number 9 bottom pin from the pin kit and insert it with the pointed end of the pin face down into the 1st pin chamber. There is no master pin being used in the 1st chamber. Note, because a setup key is being used, not all bottom pins will be flush with the top of the plug. In the 2nd pin chamber, install a number 3 bottom pin and then a number 4 master pin. Continue loading the remaining bottom pins and master pins in the remaining chambers. Note that the number 3 top pins and springs have already been loaded into the shell in a previous step. Leave the setup key fully inserted in the plug. Carefully slide the plug out of the pinning block, keeping the key fully inserted. Make sure the undercut portion of the plug follower is facing away from the top pins. Position the top of the shell so it is horizontal. Position the key so it is vertical. While applying slight resistance to the plug follower, slide the plug into the shell. Make sure the undercut portion of the follower is pointing away from the top pins throughout the process. Make sure the keyway remains in a vertical position throughout the process as well. Once the plug is fully inserted into the shell, turn the shell until it is vertically aligned with the key. At this point, the top pins will drop down and prevent the plug from moving. While holding the plug against the shell, remove the setup key. Position the core face down. Insert the cap pin spring. Then insert the cap pin with the pointed end facing outward. Place the cap over the back of the plug. Use the smaller end of the cap tool to rotate the cap clockwise until it is lightly snug against the back of the plug. Test the operating and control keys. If there is excessive resistance when turning the key, loosen the cap a couple of notches using a pointed tool. If the key cannot be removed without pushing the plug face inward, tighten the cap a couple of notches. Test the keys one additional time. Congratulations! You now have the information you need to successfully master key Schlage large format interchangeable cores. For additional information, contact customer care at 877-671-7011 or check out the Allegion website at allegion.com/US.